Republicans in Congress are pushing the Obama administration to slow down its plan for the internet. The White House is moving to give up the administration's control of the World Wide Web.
Critics say that could be bad for free speech and even business around the world. Jennifer Wishon has the story from Washington.
America has always been the main player in managing the World Wide Web. Even conservatives who typically want to limit the role of government say it's an example of Washington doing something well.
It's very relaxed control, which is why I think we've seen the internet grow to be an incredible voice of freedom, not just in the United States, but around the world.
In the late 90s, the Commerce Department formed a nonprofit agency called the Internet Corporation for Assigned Names and Numbers, or ICANN, which governs the system that assigns website addresses and directs internet traffic.
We're talking about every email, every time that you search something on Google. I mean, we're talking about every transaction.
Sure, every transaction.
But following Edward Snowden's revelations about America's spying activities, the Obama administration is feeling international pressure to give away the authority to direct web traffic. Even the head of ICANN says everyone with an interest in the internet deserves a voice in the management of it as equal partners. But the big question is, if the internet isn't in U.S. hands, whose hands do we trust? China and Russia are waiting in the wings to fill the vacuum if the U.S. cedes control, and there's a great fear that the internet will eventually wind up under the control of a UN organization called the International Telecommunications Union.
It's controlled by bad actors. In fact, they've now passed already a resolution through that will allow governments to shut off websites, and that won't be a violation of human rights.
Indeed, many critics worry if another country or countries take over managing the web, it could lead to the suppression of free speech and political dissent, possibly even hurting international business over the web. Congress is considering two actions. One delays the transfer of control. Another requires congressional approval before the Obama administration can act. And there's bipartisan concern. Even former President Bill Clinton thinks the administration's plans are a bad idea.
A lot of people who've been trying to take this authority away from the United States wanted to do it for the sole purpose of cracking down on internet freedom and limiting it and having governments protect their backsides instead of empower their people.
Many Americans are also concerned. Nearly 120,000 people have signed this petition to keep the control of the internet in the land of the free. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
The issue here is, do you want the U.S. Constitution backstopping your rights of free speech on the internet, or do you want to allow some international consortium created by Russia, China, the United States, the UN, having that backstop? And under the UN Charter, there's no Bill of Rights and there's no guarantee of free speech. So if you want to get involved in this, go to aclj.org and you can sign that petition. Well, in other news, the president is getting a new Secretary of Health and Human Services. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Gordon, the woman who's been in charge of overseeing the president's health care law is resigning 6 months after its botched rollout. And Republicans are responding with fresh calls of repeal. They say while Kathleen Sebelius may be leaving, the problems with Obamacare are still here. Caitlin Burke has that story.
Health and Human Services Secretary Kathleen Sebelius is out, and White House Budget Director Sylvia Matthews Burwell is set to take her place. The Obama administration hoping a new face in charge of Health and Human Services will signify a fresh start for Obamacare.
The website has never crashed. It is functional, but at a very slow speed and very low reliability.
Sebelius's term at HHS was plagued by the disastrous rollout of the healthcare law, including the crippling glitches on healthcare.gov that persisted up to the final enrollment deadline on March 31st.
We do not have any reliable data around enrollment, which is why we haven't given it to date.
She also bore responsibility for the contraception mandate that forces religious business owners and groups to provide drugs that may induce abortion.
Ultimately, it is the federal government telling people of faith to violate their religious beliefs, and if you don't, you're going to suffer fines and penalties.
Still, Republicans say it's not Sebelius that's flawed, but rather the health care law she defended. They say that even after she's gone, it will continue to fall short. The Obama administration is fighting critics by touting new enrollment numbers. They say 7.5 million people signed up by the March 31st deadline, exceeding expectations. But two new reports cast doubts on the rosy Obamacare numbers. The Fiscal Times cites studies by the Rand Corporation and Express Scripts. They show only 3.9 million people actually enrolled in insurance plans, a number that falls far below even the lowest enrollment expectations. And those who did enroll don't provide the support needed to prevent increases in premiums or deductibles. Express Scripts found that the incoming enrollees actually require more medical attention than previous risk pools. Signs that huge challenges still remain for Obamacare. All problems waiting for the new Health and Human Services Secretary. Caitlin Burke, CBN News.
A congressional committee has voted to hold former IRS official Lois Lerner in contempt of Congress because she's refused to answer questions about her involvement in the Tea Party scandal. Lawmakers want to know why the IRS targeted Tea Party and other conservative groups, and they say Lerner is blocking them from finding the truth. Lawyers for the conservative groups believe politics is behind Lerner's actions. They say Democrats have always been critical of the Tea Party movement. But the chairman of the investigating committee, Darrell Issa, told CBN News Democrats and the Obama administration are simply scared of the Tea Party.
I think the president really does fear them. You can go after the Koch brothers by name, but Tea Party isn't one party or one group. It's people all around America who simply want to get back to the principles of liberty.
In other news, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio plans to allow religious groups to keep meeting for worship services in the city's public schools. That announcement comes days ahead of Passover and Easter. Congregations could have been left without homes if de Blasio hadn't acted after a recent court ruling upheld a ban on religious groups meeting in public schools. The ban was instituted under former Mayor Michael Bloomberg. But de Blasio says he believes a faith-based organization has a right, just like anyone else, to use those spaces in schools. He says he'll update the rules on the issue. Computer experts are still working on fixes for the internet security bug called Heartbleed. It's put online passwords, credit cards, and other sensitive information at risk of being exposed. Researchers say the problem is with the encryption technology in web browsers. The Heartbleed breach allows criminals to view that traffic even if the security is supposedly working. Researchers say the threat is indeed serious, and they're advising people to change all their passwords. The threat could extend to all kinds of computers, including tablets, and possibly even some smartphones. Gordon, this was a massive and serious breach.
It is, and you can't overemphasize how serious this is, and it literally puts every credit card number you have at risk. The other problem is, regardless of what you do in terms of changing the numbers and the passwords, until a fix is put into place, changing your password isn't going to help you at all because they'll just be able to read your new password. So we've got to get the fix up and in place, and then everyone is going to have to be changing every single password you have.
Religious expressions in the Air Force are coming under review. That after a cadet at the Air Force Academy was forced to remove a Bible verse from his personal message board. Top officials, chaplains, and legal officers will meet to make sure current policies don't prevent service members from expressing their religious beliefs. Congressman Randy Forbes and 41 members of Congress wrote to the superintendent of the Air Force Academy asking for an explanation of the incident. Forbes said forbidding military members from practicing the very rights they're protecting is, quote, unconscionable. Operation Blessing is helping provide food for hungry children in Lesotho. Nearly every day, village residents are faced with the hard task of feeding hungry children who come knocking at their doors. Mampese, a local resident, prayed to God, promising she would help feed the hungry children with the Lord's help. That prayer is now coming true. Operation Blessing, in partnership with Faith Foundation, is helping supply the food and resources needed for each meal. Today, Mampese and several other volunteers in Lesotho welcome hungry children into their own homes and provide a daily and nutritious meal. And you can find out more about Operation Blessing by going to their website at ob.org.